In 4 years, we've created 16.6 million new jobs, the most of any single presidential term in history. There wasn't a month, not a single month, when the economy lost jobs, another record for any presidency. In fact, the last month America lost jobs was the month before I came to office. And the question is, I want to make it clear, how and why did we make such progress? We did it by fundamentally changing the economic policy of this country. After decades of trickle-down economics that primarily benefited those at the very top, Kamala and I and our administration have written a new playbook that's growing the economy from the middle out and the bottom up that benefits everyone. The new playbook is working, but in 10 days, our administration will end and the new administration will begin. We're going to face another inflection point. Do we continue to grow the economy from the middle out and the bottom up as we have the past 4 years, or do we backslide to an economic theory that benefits those at the very top while working people and middle-class people struggled for their fair share of growth? 4 years ago, when Kamala and I came to office, 3,000 Americans are dying per day because of the pandemic. Millions of Americans have lost their jobs and were at risk of losing their homes. Hundreds of thousands of factories and businesses closed, creating despair in so many communities all across America. Supply chains were shattered. Prices soared from everything from cars to home appliances. The previous administration had no real plan to get us through one of the toughest periods in the nation's history. In fact, there's an old saying, if the only tool is a hammer you have, everything looks like a nail. And over the course of decades, our Republican leadership's trickle-down economic was a hammer and working people were the nail. Slashing taxes for the very wealthy and biggest corporations. Offshoring jobs and factories for cheaper labor overseas while importing products that used to be made in America. To offset its cost, advocates of trickle-down economics ripped a social safety net, trying to privatize Social Security and Medicare, trying to deny access to affordable health care and prescription drug costs. Lifting the fortunes of the wealthy often meant attacking the rights of workers. We came to office with a different vision of America. From the first 2 months I was in office, I signed the American Rescue Plan that put shots in arms and checks in pockets to vaccinate the nation and return us to full employment. We followed up with long-term investments in our future. My Investing in America agenda, which includes the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, the CHIPS and Science Act, the Inflation Reduction Act, together mark the most significant investment in America since the New Deal. The Inflation Reduction Act alone is the most significant investment in climate and clean energy ever, anywhere in the world. And we make these investments. When we do it, we buy American. Buy America has been the law of the land since the 30s. It says that any money the president is authorized by Congress to spend should use American workers and American products. The past administration, including my predecessor, failed to buy American, to use American workers, but not on our watch. We're modernizing roads, bridges, ports, airports, clean water systems, affordable high-speed broadband systems and internet, and so much more. And we've incentivized building all these large federal projects with American products and American union labor. Remember the shortage of semiconductors during the pandemic? Those tiny little chips, computer chips, the size of your fingertip, that power everything in our everyday lives, from vehicles to refrigerators to advanced weapons to your cell phones. America invented these computer chips, but over time we stopped making them. And chip factories went overseas for cheaper labor. So when the pandemic hit, we found out how vulnerable America was. Supply chains abroad shut down because of the pandemic. We couldn't get the chips, and prices soared. For example, it takes over 3,000 of these computer chips to build an automobile today. And when overseas factories making those chips shut down, the production stopped and the cost of new cars soared. It didn't have to be this way. I was determined to change that. And that's what we've done with the CHIPS and Science Act, which has attracted $350 billion in private sector investment in America, including from Korea and Taiwan and other countries. These investments are building new fabs. They call them the place where they build these chips. New fabs, massive chip factories the size of several football fields, on fields of dream all across America, creating so far 125,000 jobs on the construction side of this, which will ultimately create tens of thousands more jobs, tens of thousands. These jobs in these quote-called fabs are paying over $100,000 a year, and you don't need a college degree. It's not just the fabs. These investments are creating opportunities for entire communities, for small business, creating even more jobs and much more. You know, when they build these factories, they're going to find out that they're going to need drugstores and shops and restaurants, and everything grows. When faced with unfair practices abroad, we've taken tough but targeted action on behalf of the American workers, businesses, and factory towns. We know the pandemic and Russia's war against Ukraine and the inflation they created caused enormous pain and hardship all across America and around the world. And so we took aggressive action that brought down prices, ordered the biggest release of our strategic petroleum reserve in our history, reducing the price of gas at the pump here in America. Also challenged the oil and gas companies to take their record profits and invest in more production. Today, American energy production is at record levels, including record oil and gas production. Gas prices are $3 a gallon, which is below the price before the Russian invasion of Ukraine. My Inflation Reduction Act took on Big Pharma and reduced the price of insulin for seniors with diabetes to $35 a month, from as much as $400 a month. Inflation Reduction Act also finally gives Medicare the power to negotiate lower drug prices across the board. As of this month, out-of-pocket prescription drug costs that's already passed will be capped at $2,000 per year, no matter how expensive the drugs are. Even those expensive cancer drugs that cost $10,000, $12,000, $14,000 a year, no senior will have to pay more than $2,000 a year. These and other reforms not only save seniors money, it saves the American taxpayers money. $160 billion will be saved over the next decade because Medicare will no longer have to pay the exorbitant prices that pharmaceutical companies have been charging. You know, with our historic backing of unions, public support for unions is the highest it's been in more than half a century, and the labor movement is expanding to new companies and new industries. The middle-out, bottom-up playbook is also about asking the very wealthy and the most profitable corporations, we want them to do well, but begin to pay their fair share in taxes. My predecessor's tax cut, last time he was here, not only increased the federal debt by $2 trillion, it overwhelmingly benefited the biggest corporations, delivering tax cuts to the top 1%, worth more than 50 times what the middle-class families receive. And you've heard me say it 100 times. We have over 1,000 billionaires in America. They paid an average of 8.2% in federal taxes. Look, folks, my approach is leading to better results for everyone. I kept my commitment that no one earning less than $400,000 a year would pay a single penny more in federal taxes. I fought hard to expand the child tax credit for working families that, when it existed, cut child poverty nearly in half. I expanded tax credits to make health insurance more affordable for millions of Americans enrolled in the Affordable Care Act. Because of our policies and confidence of entrepreneurs in our economy, we have also seen 21 million new business applications filed in our administration, the most in any single presidential term on record. And it's important because every single one of those applications for small business is an act of hope, believing in the country. There's so much more from our playbook. But the bottom line is we've come a long way from the crisis we've inherited. Let me close where I started. With this morning's jobs report, more than 250,000 jobs in December. In 4 years, the economy created 16.6 million new jobs, the most in any single presidential term. We've created jobs every single month I was in office. During my presidency, we saw the lowest average unemployment rate of any administration in the last 50 years. And battling through the worldwide effects of the pandemic, Putin's war in Ukraine, and supply chain disruption, inflation rate is down to nearly 2%. These are simple, well-established economic benchmarks that measures the strength of any economy, the success or failure of any president's 4 years in office. I believe the economy I'm leaving is the best in the world and stronger than ever for all Americans. So I think that's what we have. We'll see what the next president does. But I want to thank you all. God bless you all, and may God protect our troops. I'm happy to take some questions.
Mr. President, you talked about gas prices coming down. You made today a decision about sanctions against Russia. Are you concerned that that decision will perhaps lead to gas prices going up? And can you explain why those sanctions were imposed today and not earlier in the term?
The sanctions are imposed today because they will have profound effect on the growth of the Russian economy and make it more difficult for Putin to conduct his wars. It is probable that gas prices could increase as much as 3-4 cents a gallon, but it's going to have a more profound impact on Russia's ability to continue to act in the way it's acting in the conduct of war.
Mr. President, did you speak to Pope Francis about canceling your trip to the Vatican, and are you disappointed to not make that visit before leaving office?
Well, to tell you the truth, I am disappointed, but it's much more important I stay here with all that's going on. He fully understands that. I did not personally speak to him, but the team spoke with the apostolic delegate, but I am disappointed.
Mr. President, have you had any reaction to the President Trump's verdict today up in New York, and whether or not you believe that the punishment fit the crime? And also, sir, on pardons, have you ruled out a pardon for yourself or any other additional members of the family?
For myself?
Yes, sir.
What would I pardon myself for?
That's what I'm asking.
No, I have no contemplation of pardoning myself for anything. I didn't do anything wrong.
Mr. President, would you comment on Meta's decision to end its fact-checking operations in the United States? Is that a good decision, in your opinion?
Well, look, the whole idea of walking away from fact-checking, as well as not reporting anything having to do with discrimination regarding TPS, I find to be just contrary to American justice, the way we talk about one another. Telling the truth matters. I mean, I know I'm on national television, but you all are local reporters and national reporters. I'm not, this is not a legit, real question, but what do you think? You think it doesn't matter that they let be printed, where millions of people read it, things that are simply not true? I mean, I don't know what that's all about. It's just completely contrary to everything America's about. We want to tell the truth. We haven't always done it as a nation, but we want to tell the truth. And the idea that, a billionaire can buy something and say, by the way, from this point on, we're not gonna fact check anything. And when you have millions of people going online, reading this stuff, it is, anyway, I think it's really shameful.
Mr. President, do you regret your decision to run for re-election? Do you think that made it easier for your predecessor to now become your successor?
I don't think so. I think I would have beaten Trump, could have beaten Trump, and I think that Kamala could have beaten Trump, would have beaten Trump. It wasn't about, I thought it was important to unify the party. And when the party was worried about whether or not I was going to be able to move, I thought, even though I thought I could win again, I thought it was better to unify the party. And it was the greatest honor in my life to be President of the United States, but I didn't want to be one who caused a party that wasn't unified to lose an election. And that's why I stepped aside, but I was confident she could win.
You think she should run again?
What your assessment is of how long Ukraine can last without further aid? In fact, your administration marks the end of American provision for their
Well, I had a long talk with Zelensky today. And I think that as long as we continue to keep Western Europe united as it relates to Ukraine, that there is a real chance that the Ukrainians can prevail, because the cost to Russia is incredibly high. Over 600 some thousand dead or wounded. The Koreans they brought in is having high mortality rates as well. And I made it clear that I provided every bit of funding that authority I have as president to be able to do that now. And I know that there are a significant number of Democrats and Republicans on the Hill who think we should continue to support Ukraine. It is my hope and expectation they'll speak up and not agree to President if Trump decides to cut off funding for Ukraine.
Did the President-elect's position on that conflict influence your decision to enact the oil and other sanctions on Russia today? In other words, put more pressure on Russia at a point where the President-elect appears to be driving to the table?
The truth of the matter is, no. But if those other conditions didn't exist, it would have had an impact. I already decided that Putin's in tough shape right now. And I think it's really important that he not have any breathing room to continue to do the god-awful things he's continuing to do. And as I said, he's got his own problems economically. Significant problems economically, as well as politically at home. And so I decided to do everything I possibly could within my power and authority to give Ukraine every advantage it could have to be able to sustain support for an independent Ukraine.
You said Vice President Harris would be able to beat, you said Vice President Harris had a good shot to beat Trump. Do you think she should run again in 4 years?
I think that's a decision. I think she's competent to run again in 4 years. That'll be a decision for her to make.
Mr. President, on Venezuela, the sanctions that your administration announced today, some are saying that they don't go far enough by not targeting the petroleum sector. Why was this administration hesitant to apply further sanctions to the oil and gas industry there?
That's still being investigated in terms of what impact it would have and whether or not it would just be replaced by Iran or any other country. So it matters what would happen afterwards. I had a long discussion again with the man who should be appointed president on that score. But since I didn't have a clear answer to what that would be, if I had more time, I may very well do that, but I didn't have enough data to make that judgment.
If I could also ask about Havana syndrome. Today, the intelligence community assessment changed slightly, with 2 intelligence agencies now saying there's an even chance that this is being caused by a foreign actor. Do you personally believe that a foreign actor is responsible for these incidents?
No. Now, do I believe that ISIS's theology, if you will, has impacted people in America? Some that are not particularly well suited to handle the life of they live. It has that effect. But I find no evidence, and I spent 17, 18 hours with the community right off the bat trying to determine whether or not there was any outside influence. And thus far, we find no connection between an outside player, individual. But that doesn't mean someone reading the malarkey that's going out there isn't influenced by it. Both these men, both in Nevada and in Louisiana, have been men who've had their own problems but not because they've been influenced by a specific individual.
Sorry, so my question was on Havana syndrome, not Nevada, sorry. On the Havana syndrome, the intelligence community today, part of their assessment changed, saying that there is now an even chance that the Havana syndrome cases and incidents, there's a foreign actor potentially behind them. Do you agree with that assessment?
I don't have the full brief on that right now. I'm not going to comment on that.
Do you have an update on Austin Tice in Syria and whether or not he's...
The answer is I'm not going to respond to that because that's an active, ongoing issue. You know my attitude about getting prisoners released from abroad, and I'm not going to comment on that right now.
Just one question again back on pardons and commutations. Can you just give us a sense of what other pardons and commutations you're considering in your last 10 days?
Well, the answer is no, because 2 things. One is that it depends on some of the language and expectations that Trump broadcast in the last couple days here as to what he's going to do. The idea that he would punish people for not adhering to what he thinks should be policies related to his well-being is outrageous. But there's still consideration of some folks, nothing but no decision.
Thanks,
Have you talked about what kind of post-presidency? Have you decided what kind of role will you have post-presidency, sir? Do you plan to speak out after you leave Washington, or are you going to follow kind of more of the Bush model, where you're kind of out of sight and out of mind?
I'm not going to be out of sight or out of mind.
Thank you, everyone.